Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. It's definitely been a pretty interesting week because I received some gifts from viewers, including a Leshak battleship. I still have to do a little bit of skilling before I take that out, but that's like a 600 million ISK gift. Thank you very much for all of that. I also got some stuff in my redeemable items, a couple of skins and 1000 plex. Strangely enough, I couldn't see who that came from, so I can't thank you directly, but yeah, got some nice gifts last week, and thank you very much for all of that support, of course. Next up, the market ticker. I should quickly talk about that as well, of course, because that has changed in a very nice way. You can now dedicate a folder on your quick bar to show up in the market ticker. It'll still show some other stuff as well, like extractors and injectors. I think CCP is still hoping that that can be like a slight marketing tool for some of the real life related goods, but I'm open to suggestions for putting stuff in the ticker. This week I'm taking some implants, the minerals, and then there's also still some accelerators that are going, so those will show up as well. I'm thinking there's two things that I'll definitely do. That is to put in event related items, and the other one would be my own investments. If I make an investment in something that I don't regularly cover in EVE Talk, I should definitely put that in the ticker as well. But if you have your own suggestions, feel free to put those in the comments, and I'll see if it makes sense. I'll add them to the ticker as well. It's definitely a nice opportunity to have different types of goods show up throughout EVE Talk. And talking about EVE Talk, let's get started. We're here for the market. We'll first start with a quick glance at the New Eden store, but this week I'm seeing nothing all too special. We've got some bundles, but we don't have any massive sales or anything like that that are visible on the New Eden store, so not much to say there, nothing that interests me personally. Let's move to the in-game market then, and as always we're gonna start with some plex and stuff at 220. Like that. And plex in Jita, very interesting. You might already have seen it from the from the EVE Talk ticker itself, up above 3 million, 3.1 million for the sellers, almost 3 million for the buyers. If we take a look at the player owned trade hubs, the sellers have also gone up above 3 million, but not by as much as in Jita themselves, and buyers, well, that's straight in line with Jita, very close to 3 million. So definitely an increase in price, and 3 million seems to be the new standard for plex at the moment. We've been battered quite a bit with sales. We've seen quite a few buy opportunities, including one for less than 2.8 million ISK. And there was one comment on one of the EVE Talks that said that he put all his ISK in plex, and I think it was on this bottom here. And if you did that, I do think that you will have made a good investment. One that's too risky for me personally, but we do see that the summer is over, September is coming back. We can expect activity to increase, which will usually mean more demand as well. And if CCP can come up with some nice release information for the near future, which they usually do, they do try to hype up winter, then we will probably see a very nice increase in price for plex, and anything bought here will make a nice profit in my opinion. Next up, we'll move on to the multiple pilot trading certificate. Very similar chart, of course, after all the sales, and two pretty obvious buy opportunities for less than a billion ISK, close to 900 million ISK as well. We are now shooting up past the 1.1 billion ISK mark without too much slowdown. Almost 1.2 billion for the first seller, and more than 1.1 billion for the buyers as well. That mark has gone up quite a little bit. You could already take some profits from that, but you can also see the drawback of the multiple pilot trading certificate. When there's sales, you get massive volumes. When there's no sales and prices increase, the volumes decrease quite substantially. So this can be an investment that you can be stuck with for quite a long time. Next up, we'll take a look at the skill extractors. Obviously, very closely tied to plex, so those are going up towards 350 million ISK on the chart, 340 at the moment for the sellers, 335 for the buyers. That's one thing that I think you should note. If we compare that to the previous weeks and months, those buyers were always quite a bit lower, and on increasing prices we would usually have an increased margin between the sellers and the buyers. But this week it is completely different. It feels completely different because the buyers are basically forced up quite a bit as well. They're willing to pay more for all of these goods. Next up, we have the skill injectors. We'll start with the large ones, which against grain continues to go down and in fact breaks through the 700 million mark. That is very interesting. 706 million for the sellers, 690 for the buyers. Should indicate quite a bit of supply, but for me personally, we see what plex are doing, which is a part of the price calculation for the skill injectors. And at the moment, I would also keep in mind that this is July, August, September. These are the summer months. Less activity. We'll probably see fewer alpha clones and things like that might be interested in the large skill injectors. As a result here, we do see a 1-year low price point, less than 700 million ISK, which is something that we've not seen in quite a while. And I would personally say that not for all your ISK, but as part of your investment strategy, some large skill injectors at the current price range of around 700 million ISK to me make a lot of sense. Next up, we have the small skill injectors. Those are now trying to form a bottom basically at less than 140 million ISK. No, almost less than 140, I would say. 142 for the sellers, 136 for the buyers. So here again, you have an opportunity to grab skill injectors, small skill injectors, probably for less than 140 million ISK. And that is a 1-year low point. And we've not seen that in a whole year. So it might be that something has clearly changed in either the supply or the demand for the skill points themselves. Maybe the meta has been a bit too stale. It's like Rorquals, Caps and Supers. Everybody has the pilots that they want for that. But keep in mind, you never know when CCP comes up with some other cool stuff like the precursor ships, which I've already heard, I think it was at FanFest, that there are plans for more precursor ships, more types that might make for interesting gameplay. So once those get into the capital range, that might be lots of skill point demand all of a sudden. So it's really going to be the development of EVE itself that I think is going to be a major factor in deciding whether or not you should make the investments, and whether or not you'll have really big profits for the skill injectors and for plex as well, of course. Finally, we also have the daily alpha injector that is going back up in price together with plex. So I think that this will have been like a bit of a sale or something like that drove the price back down to less than 55 million ISK. We're back above that, 59 million for the sellers, 54 million for the buyers. Still a bit of hesitation in my opinion, because you can see that those buyers are not forced up as quickly as in some of the other goods. But considering what plex is doing, I think it's pretty much unstoppable. And that for the injectors, I personally do feel like we're reaching bottom prices and that this would be a good time to grab a couple. Next up, we have the minerals at 815. Like that. As always, we'll start with titanium. You might already have seen that it's not good news. We're continuing the downward spiral to a more normal price of 5 to 5.5 ISK. It's still holding on a little bit above that, but the trend is almost inevitable unless nullsec would explode in another massive war. We are on our way back down to that average price 5 to 5.5. At the moment, we're selling for 5.9 million ISK. The bad news, of course, 1.4 billion, 2 billion, 2 billion, another 1.1 billion as the cheapest sell order. That is just too much, and I think that the market is going to continue on that trend. It must also be said that with the Imperium deploying and destroying all those keep stars, it was a massive boon to the titanium price up to 7.5 ISK. We've not seen that in a very long time, and such volatility does often correct quite quickly as well. And the buyers are still at 562, so you're definitely still selling a bit above average, but not by that much anymore for titanium. All of this should be bad news for the minerals that have not moved in this period, stuff like pyrite, that as you can tell had a little bit of a hobble, but really never managed to break out to any reasonable price, and as a result we are now driving back down to less than 4 ISK and staying there at the moment. 3.9 for the sellers, 3.88 for the buyers. Super cheap pyrite, and this is obviously one of the minerals that is now massively oversupplied throughout New Eden. Next up we have Mexlon, which I was hoping for a bit of a more interesting spike, seeing what Tritanium did. But nope, it managed to spike up to 75 ISK and now is giving back all of those gains as well. Is in fact heading back for 65 ISK, which I would say is below average. 70 would be the average price for me for Mexlon, and my target sell price as well when I'm mining. 67.12 for the sellers, 65.8 for the buyers. We are talking slightly below average prices. I would not blame you for selling Mexlon at this price range right now, because it's a very difficult time, of course, for minerals in general. As activity increases, often mining activity also increases in tandem. I still have to look at the monthly report for August. I really should do that to get a bit of an idea of what to expect when it comes to minerals. But personally, I'm getting the feeling that unless we get another massive war, which I'm not really seeing too many signs of that at the moment, it's not good news and will continue to be under pressure, because there's basically too much mining, too much supply, and not enough destruction in the game in general. Next up we have Isogen, the other oversupplied mineral that didn't even bump up during the Tritanium bump here, just staying at, well, that really low price. 26.8 for the sellers and 25.2 for the buyers. And then we've got Noxium next, that did jump up a little bit, not bad, but the jump off point was 250 ISK, which was like the 1 year low point and like a historical low for Noxium as well. So this is actually, in my opinion, a bit of a dangerous situation. I would count this spike as being from 300 to 360, so not that massive. It looks a lot better on the chart than it actually is, and now we can see that in the last couple of weeks we've been testing that 300 price mark, and my fear is that if the sellers go below that, look out below, we might be in for 250 to 300 for Noxium. 296, and there it is already, 296.69 for the sellers and 287 for the buyers. I think that the pressure is going to continue. We've got 20 million here, another 5 million here. There's going to be more supplies coming in, and I do think that Noxium is in for a rough ride to a more normal price range for the near future of 250 to 300 rather than 300 to 350, which you could have seen most of the year. But yeah, that defense here has already broken down. I think we're on our way down. Next up we have Zydrine, that is also continuing the downtrend, which is of course showing that again lots of mining activity, lots of moon mining activities, just more minerals being created across the board and not enough ships being blown up. Especially in the Tech 1 department. So Zydrine currently selling for 460 ISK, buyers coming in at 436, really cheap. And Megasite is the same thing, unfortunately. It was trying to hold on quite nicely, but here at the tail end, finally someone came in with big supplies. Might be someone from Nelsik that all of a sudden did decide on exporting a good chunk of their Megasite, or someone was patient enough to stockpile enough of it, but the result was immediate, a nag down towards 500 ISK on the chart. 540 for the sellers, 516 now for the buyers. And then finally we have Morphite, which, well, after a really nice spike up as well, which is I think showing the I would say the problem that we have, the reason why we have these continuously lower mineral prices is because Tech 1 just isn't in the meta outside of capitals and super capitals. It's Tech 2, and which is why Morphite moved very nicely from like 8,500 ISK to 11,000 ISK, but of course as activity decreases, that price goes back down, and we're back to less than 9,000 ISK apparently. 8,974 for the sellers, 8,900 for the buyers. If you want to start your Morphite investments, look at this chart. You're grabbing it for less than 9,000 ISK. It makes sense, in my opinion, to start at this point. Next up, we have PI at 1415. like that. So let's get started here. Here are the broadcast nodes continuing to be on the lower end at the moment. This is, in my opinion, also summer activity and the lack of any actual major announcements that would indicate that the new structures for sure will use these advanced PI materials. So the market is still hesitating a little bit. We do have a nice volume spike, but the price reaction is very limited, to say the least. 2.1 million for the sellers, 2 million for the buyers. Still okay if you need to make your purchases, in my opinion. Construction blocks was moving a little bit, trying to get back to the average of 12,000 ISK, but now the bottom has dropped out of that apparently. Are we at less than 10k? Yes. 9,900 for the sellers, 9,200 for the buyers. Definitely, if you look at this chart, an unusual buy opportunity all of a sudden in the construction blocks, one that I personally, I think, will make a trip to Cheetah for. That's just completely outside of the norm, back to a one-year low point, less than 10,000 ISK for both sellers and buyers below the entire chart. This to me is an opportunity that you can't pass up on. Next up we have the consumer electronics, also seeing some signs of pressure with these medium daily prices, but holding at 12.5 to 13k at the moment. 12,750 for the sellers and 12,000 for the buyers. Bit of a margin, but nothing too crazy there. Next up we have coolants. Fuel related is now starting to move back in the 10,000 to 11,000 price range. I'm starting to see normal market activity here. So basically the decommissioning of the POSs for moon mining and the replacing them with the new refineries, which I think happened here in November as we crashed down in these PI material prices, has now been completed. We are back moon mining across the board. We have more fuel consumption, and as a result we're back in the normal price range. 10 to 11,000 ISK is actually, I think, historically where coolant has always been at. So that bottom here of 8,000 ISK would actually have been a nice buy opportunity. It always felt very risky to me, but looks like that comeback is real. Enriched uranium staying at around 12,500 ISK. It's also fuel related. You can see the dip here to less than 9,000 ISK would have been a nice buy opportunity. Right now we sell at 13k, buyers coming in at 12,260. Not bad, a normal price as well. The integrity response drones this week are dropping off to less than 2.5 million. Bit of a drop off, not bad. Where are the buyers at? Less than 2.4 million, and the buyers at a bit above 2.5. Slight buy opportunity again in the integrity response drones. The market seems to be hesitating. We've got some investors, right? You can see that on the volumes here, that are taking their positions, but no one is going completely crazy on that, because I think that there is still this possibility that the new structures for this winter will not use advanced PI materials. That is definitely the risk that you're taking with those investments. Mechanical parts, fuel related, moving in the 11,000 to 12,000 ISK range at the moment. Yeah, 11,300 for the sellers, 11,200 for the buyers. So we are actually at a lower end and a very narrow margin here. But very good news again for fuel related PI producers. Nuclear reactors doesn't manage to show us the same volatility that we've gotten used to. So it's staying at around 100,000 ISK. 98,000 for the sellers, 90,000 for the buyers. That is, you know, not as volatile as we would like. You can also see that the volumes are struggling from time to time as well, compared to the volumes on this spike, which were absolutely massive. And it's not that we are crashing down and that you can say, yeah, all right, we can buy these nuclear reactors for like 80,000 ISK or anything like that, and that we can then have the patience to move. No, it's just staying meandering on that average price a bit too long. That's too bad. Organic mortar applicators, bit of pressure at the tail end, staying below close to 1.1 million. Yeah, a bit above that for the sellers, but very close to 1 million ISK for the buyers. So if you still need these advanced PI materials, it's still the right time to grab them. Robotics, that is bad news for the first time in a couple of months, I would say, for fuel related PI materials, dropping to less than 100,000 ISK on the chart. Sellers are coming in at 102,000, but buyers at 98,000, and apparently they're winning out because the averages are below that price range here. Interesting to see a bit of pressure all of a sudden in robotics. Self-harmonizing power cores flat at 2 million. Not much to say again, right? Buyers below 2 million. It's a a slight buy opportunity, so it's that same story again, but it also shows that the market is not certain that this is where we should make our moves. Superconductors next. Back up a little bit. Let's see here, 12.5k. Yeah, just basically 12,000. No, actually it's 11,000 to 12,500 seems to be the price range. Currently selling for 12,800. Buyers at 11,900. I would say we're slightly above average. Nothing too crazy, but you can definitely sell what you make. And then we've got test cultures, which after dipping to less than 7,500 disc now came back to 8k, but is again hesitating at this price range. 8,700 for the sellers, 8,000 for the buyers. Not too much demand, and I'm thinking here you could still try to grab some test cultures close to 8,000 ISK. Let's see if we can find that on the chart. Definitely at the lower end of the chart as well. And finally, the wetware mainframes. Ooh, that is interesting. A bit of a jump down as well to a close to at least a 1-year low point. 2.1 million on the chart. 2.2 for the sellers, 2.1 million for the buyers, which is not as low. So it's already on its way back up just a little bit because someone made a move on that with the volumes yesterday. But again, advanced PI materials do seem to be decently low at the moment. Next up, we have our advanced moon materials at 2045. Like that. As always, carbide related stuff first. Here is the crystalline carbide, which is pretty much flat above 150. So not too much action in the last couple of weeks since I started checking it. That's unfortunate, but yeah, 157 to 158 for the sellers, 155 for the buyers. Very narrow margin at the lower end of the chart. So I would still say that if you're looking to invest in some advanced moon mining materials, this is still one that you can try to grab some of. Next up, we have the Fernite Carbide that managed to spike up to more than 200. I think that was right before we started checking the item, and is now crashing back down to less than average, I would say, at this point. 169 for the sellers and 155 for the buyers. On the buyer side here, that's definitely another one that if you're looking for those investments, I would start to grab a little bit of this. Next up, number 3, titanium carbide is holding on at around 200 ISK. That is still less than average for the year, but is still not the 1-year low point either. 192 though for the sellers and 190 for the buyers. More sellers coming in. Under pressure, that is pretty obvious in my book, and again, I wouldn't buy right now. I think that there is still more pressure incoming, but I do think that if you want to have the timing correct with titanium carbide, you need to keep a daily eye on the item to see if it actually does crash down to, let's say, 175 in that range. That's where I think you have to make your move. And you know, look at that chart at 200, but sellers coming in 199, 195, 193, 192. That pressure is there, and if it continues for enough, that's your buy opportunity. Next up, tungsten carbide, same story. Managed to actually spend the summer above average most of the time at around 250 or better, but is now on its way back down, and anything below 200 starts to be interesting. We're not there yet though. 210 for the sellers, 210 for the buyers. Next up, we have the meta materials. Let's start with the photonic ones. Flat at 20,000 ISK, right in the middle of the chart. So I would say that that is neither good nor bad. A bit too late to sell and a bit too early to start your investments. The gap though, that is one thing to keep in mind. 20,000 for the sellers, 19,000 for the buyers. That is substantially lower all of a sudden, but it's not as low as we've seen this material go. Plasmonic meta materials, same story, right? 20,000 ISK, pretty clear landing at that price range. Look at the entire chart right in the middle of it. Buyers of this one, 19,400, 21,000 for the sellers though, so still a little bit above that, basically a bit more expensive than the photonic. Next up, we have nonlinear metamaterials that are still holding above average, I would say, at 30,000 ISK, which is not so bad. 29,000 now for the sellers, 29,000 as well for the buyers. If there's one that you can still definitely sell at a better than average price, it would be the Caldari related non-linear metamaterials. And finally, we have the terahertz metamaterials that are crashing down. So terahertz looks quite interesting. Was it also... No, tungsten not yet, but this to me looks like a pretty damn interesting chart. Just going straight through that 22,000 price barrier, some crazy averages at around 20,000, which is the lower end of the chart. Sellers coming in at 21,500. Couple of buyers at around 21, well, actually a decent amount of buyers at 21,000, but that pressure is clearly shown right here. Could be interesting. I think if you absolutely want a metamaterials investment, this would be the one I think that I would put my ISK in. For the other advanced moon materials, we see that pressure come here as well. So we see that a lot of these carbides are actually landing and at a low price point. Many of these metamaterials seem to be under pressure, and most of the other advanced moon materials were above average by quite a bit. But here, fermionic condensates, it's been going on for a couple of weeks, and we can see that the pressure is building on, I think, more stability in Nulsec. 101,000 for the sellers, 98,000 for the buyers. It's still a great price, but it's not the 110 and above that we've seen before. And you can clearly see on the chart that the averages are dropping. Ferrogel was doing quite nicely as well, but look at that, straight through the 55k mark, heading for 50,000 ISK, under pressure as well, 51,000 for the sellers, 50,500 for the buyers. But that pressure again, which is showing that there's plenty of supplies for the market at the moment. It is showing up in almost all of them now. So here is full, right? It was still looking pretty good with some volatility every month. A spike up to 1500, another one up to 1400 almost. Looking pretty good, but now here at the tail end you can see we're heading for 1000 ISK. And anything below that starts to come into the lookout for a buy opportunity range. 1000 for the sellers, 993 ISK for the buyers. A bit more, if we start to move in this range, that would be pretty interesting. Hypersynaptic fibers tried a last pull up to 16,000 ISK, but at the tail end right here, are we below 15,000 now for the sellers? Almost 15,100 for the sellers, 13,800 for the buyers though. That's quite a nice margin between these two, and again showing more signs of pressure on the prices. Nanotransmitters was very stable, holding at 6,000 ISK for quite a bit, but look at that sharp drop off now to 5,000 ISK. So sellers coming in, 5,100, buyers as well, but they're filling that gap, and all of them show more supplies, maybe a bit less demand as well. And as a result, these are back to, I would say, an average price of a bit above 5,000 ISK. If we go even lower, that's where we might want to make our investments. So very interesting to see all of this. And definitely something that I think, as we keep an eye on these advanced moon materials in the upcoming months and potentially years, we'll start to see the patterns, and I think that there is potentially really nice trading to be done here. Phenolic composites actually came from a one-year high point of 3,400 ISK, but again at the tail end here, we're heading back for 3k, 3,100 for the sellers, 2,982 for the buyers. I'm seeing this one is the strongest one so far, but definitely also showing some pressure at the tail end. Ceramic fibers, very same pattern again, 600, try to hold on to that for quite a bit, but now the drop off is unstoppable. 450 for the sellers, 433 for the buyers. We are looking for a less than 400 price if we are to look for that obvious buy opportunity. But the trend here in advanced moon materials is pretty clear, and I think that if it continues for a couple more weeks, that's when we should have our ISK ready. Next up, we have the Tech 2 ships coming in at 2830. Like that, and let's go over these. I'm personally thinking that we might see, right, advanced moon materials, we're seeing a general drop off and pressure, and so that should at some point translate into cheaper Tech 2 ships as well. Maybe if some individual ships might get oversupplied more quickly than the others, that we'll see some actual real buy opportunities. Here is the Aries now, the chart sustainably below 30 million ISK, 29 million for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers. Look at the lack of buyers here. I would say that this is a slight buy opportunity for the Aries. Try and grab them for less than 26 million. Hope for activity and some interceptor fleets being lost. And yeah, you can see where that goes. Well above 30 million is the potential. So the other question is, of course, if Advanced Moon Materials stays under this pressure for a more substantial amount of time, might it be that my original theory that we still have a second leg down for Tech 2 ships and that the average price ought to be 25 to 30 million ISK rather than 30 plus, for frigates, for instance, that is still a possibility as well. It would have been super delayed, potentially, but yeah, it's something to keep in mind as well. But this is clearly a lack of demand that is driving buyers to really low prices, and if you want that Tech 2 investment, I wouldn't blame you for grabbing a couple of Aries ships at around 26 million. The Basilisk is holding at the current price range above 250. 259 for the sellers, 248 for the buyers. Might be the redesign that yeah, it does look a little bit like a Keepstar if you look at it like that, and maybe from like a far away distance. Pretty cool that there are people that try to scam, apparently try to sell these ships for Keepstar prices, but it's still 260 million for the sellers, 248 for the buyers. Around the average, around the normal price, not much to say there. Cerberus actually dropping off even more. Yeah, that is definitely coming close to that 1-year low point again. 222 for the sellers, 212 for the buyers. And I think that the 18th, there is a new event coming with the drones. Cerberus is a very nice ship for that. Look at the chart range. You know, especially if you have any use for the ships, I wouldn't. I think that grabbing a couple might make sense. The Claw also coming to less than 30 million ISK here all of a sudden. 29 for the sellers, 28 for the buyers. So that margin is not as nice as the Aries, but look at the supply. There's hundreds of them coming to the market now for less than 30 million ISK. That pressure is there. It's not as nice on the buyer side as the Aries, but it's definitely a price of less than 30 million for the Claw. The Crow actually jumping up a little bit after touching 30 million ISK, so that one is not doing the same as the rest. 33.4 million for the sellers and 31.1 for the buyers. Not as oversupplied as we saw with the Claw, and as a result, not one that I would consider for purchase. The Crusader finally also dropping through the 30 million ISK price mark, and again, it's a lack of buyers that is pushing that price to less than 27 million on the buyer side of things. 163 here should keep things in check for a little bit as well. Slight buy opportunity in the Crusader, I would say. The Guardian is holding strong at just below 250 million ISK, so that's a no again for me. 245, 246 for the sellers, 221 for the buyers is a decent margin between the two. 221 ought to be around here on the chart. Let's see if we can get that shown. 220, yep, that's actually pretty low. So maybe actually, because it's a very wide margin here, there's decent amounts of buyers, but they don't buy that many Guardians. You could risk it. You could risk it. Guardians, you know, logistics. If there is a big fight, you're gonna lose logistics, and then you see spikes like this and like that. 220 to 300. That sounds like a pretty nice profit to me. So if you want to make an investment, the Guardian it's not the best, but it's definitely not a crazy choice. Heretic showing some signs of pressure as well. Couple of average prices even below 70 million ISK. It's a lack of buyers. Look at that, less than 65 million for the buyers. Would I make a move on this? Volume's a bit too low for that in my opinion. The Hound, that is more interesting though. Look at that sharp drop off. Even average price of 25 million. No volumes should indicate not too much demand. Well, there is still some demand, but it's coming in at less than 25 million ISK. And the sellers are still trying to unload them at 29 million ISK. This would be my choice right now. I'd say 4 or 5 Hounds, try and grab them for less than 25 million ISK, which is definitely below the entire chart. And I think a more sure spike when fights do happen, because you do have some individual groups as well that try to third party, and that's one of the go-to ships to third party is of course a stealth bomber. So the Hound for me right now the most interesting opportunity. The Ishtar also pretty low, heading for less than 250 million ISK, 257 for the sellers, 231 for the buyers. There's a decent amount of buyers, but again that gap is opening up. Manticore still too high, staying in the 35 to 40 million range. Buyers are still just shy of 35, so that's a no. The Nemesis, after dropping off, is now holding above 25 million by quite a bit. So 30 million for the sellers, 24 million for the buyers. Not as good as the Hound in my opinion. The Oniros is again logistics holding at 250 right there. Purifier also holding above 30 million, so that's a no again. And then the Raptor holding well above 30, that's a no again. Saber slight drop off, but well, Saber volumes are a bit better. Let's see where the buyers are at here. Less than 70 million ISK. That's another maybe. That if you really want to spend that ISK on Tech 2 ships, the Saber is another maybe in my book. Scimitar, after a spike up to 300 million ISK, is now driving the price back down to less than 230. Buyers 206 on the charts. Not so bad. Another maybe. So that is interesting. Still at 28 to 29 million for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. Not as good as the Hound, but clearly also a trend break and finally a breakthrough on the chart to less than 30 million ISK. And then the Taranis, after spiking up, is now on its way back down. Again, where are the buyers? 26 million. In my opinion, not as good as the Hound at 24 million. Even the Ares is a bit better. And yeah, interesting one though, as we see the pressure mounting on advanced moon materials. And in my opinion, many of these still have quite a ways down to go potentially. We are starting to see on lower activity in Nullsec, I would say same thing in the Tech 2 ships. What's in my opinion more interesting here is that while the advanced moon materials move in more uniform batches, ships have individual nuances between them that create very unusual charts from time to time. I think like the Manticore that is still going for around 40 million ISK, but then another stealth bomber, the Hound, is breaking through to a 1-year low point on the chart and selling for 24 million ISK, which is like almost half the price of another stealth bomber. And that is what makes the Tech 2 ship market very interesting when volatility does show up. And potentially here I am seeing some nice opportunities for the first time in quite a long time, something that's as pronounced as the Hound here, for instance. So yeah, interesting times in the Tech 2 market. The one danger would be that all of these would move to lower price points, to let's say a year ago normal price points, and stay there. Then of course there is the danger that the Tech 2 ships will have that second leg down, and that your investments are actually just buying in the normal trade range because of all of those moon mining activities that have increased as well. Of course, that is the one danger to trying to grab some buy opportunities at the moment. Next up, we have the Tech 3 ships at 37.30, like that. And yeah, let's start with destroyers as always. Confessor very flat at a low price of less than 35 million ISK, 34.3 for the sellers, 32.5 for the buyers. We've been here before. We do see that there's still hundreds of them on the market, but at this point I would personally wait. I've got a couple of Confessors that I bought at cheap prices, close to 30 million ISK, and so for me now I've got them, and I'm gonna wait for either it drops back down to like close to 30 million, then I might buy a couple more, or it moves up and that's when I would sell. So the Hecate actually jumps up to above 40 million ISK, and the response 115, 286, that still does exist, of course, that oversupply potential. 42 million for the sellers, 38, no, actually almost 40 million for the buyers. The Hecate definitely moved up in price all of a sudden. The Jackdaw is going back down to less than 40 million ISK, I think. Yeah, less than 40 for the sellers on, well, almost 1,000, I think, on the front page here, for 40 to 39.989 million. So that's that oversupply specter that still exists. 37 million for the buyers. It's not that bad, but it's also a little bit too late. You have had some other nice buy opportunities at like less than 35 million ISK, and I think yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I either sold here and bought around here, or I still have a couple of Jackdaws that I bought for around 35 million ISK in Jita as well. So this one, right now, to me, it's a bit of a wait and see approach, because you can see on the one hand that some of them move to above 40 million ISK and seem to be moving in that new trade range, but the others then have 1,000 ships all of a sudden on the market, which is way too much and showing that the oversupply potential still exists as well. And then we have the Zwepel showing a similar pattern as the Hecke. They are moving to a higher range, but it's still only 39 million for the sellers, 34 million for the buyers. And here you have to go to 40 million for a relisting of almost 600 ships. No, a bit above 500 ships to be more accurate. So here on the tactical destroyer market, I would personally have a wait and see approach. For the buy opportunities, I'd wait for a pronounced chart dip. And then for the sell opportunities, I'd wait for, I don't know, maybe nullsec activity, a couple of those fleets being destroyed, and a pretty pronounced spike. But right now, it could still go either way, in my opinion. And then for the cruisers, we've got the Legion dropping off to less than 150. That is very unusual. 149 for the sellers. No, actually 148 million for the sellers and 136 for the buyers. Here, that is a pretty nice trend break. All of a sudden, 136 for the buyers is also definitely at the lower end of the chart. So to be honest, if you'd be looking for a Tech 3 investment, that Legion looks like something that you might consider. The Legion is a nullsec doctrine ship that you still see used quite a little bit. Sometimes those fleets get deleted, and right now you can buy them for less than 140, which is an opportunity that has only been shown once before in the last year or so. This would be, I think, the most logical investment in Tech 3 so far. The Loki is still holding at around 200 million ISK, so I don't like that just yet. 199 for the sellers, 188 for the buyers. The Proteus is just not really in the meta right now and is holding actually at the same price range as the Legion, so I definitely would prefer to go for a Legion over the Loki if you have to. The gap is pretty wide, it's 136 million. You could buy a couple of Protea as well. And then finally we have the Tengu that is staying below 150 million ISK. 132 for the buyers, also quite a nice gap on about 1,000 Tengus on the front page of the sellers, which to me indicates that, yeah, that could be an opportunity as well. So honestly, for this week, it's really, strangely enough, looking like if you'd make a move, I would buy Legion, Tengu, and perhaps a Proteus as well as an investment. And then for the extra materials, let's see what I marked. Yeah, the faction battleships, and so that's coming at around 42 minutes. Like that. It's been a while since we took a look at them, and we're on a roll anyways. Faction frigates a couple of weeks ago, faction cruisers last week. So let's get another look at some faction stuff. Here are the faction battleships. We'll start with the pirate faction battleships. Pirate factions usually showed some signs, very individual ones that were higher, most of them around average. And for the Barghest so far, an average price of 850 million ISK, 860 for the sellers. You know, maybe slightly above average, but not too expensive, not completely out of line. The Macarial is actually at a 1-year low point. That is interesting. 443 million for the sellers, 415 for the buyers. If you have the ISK, honestly, Macarial is still a great battleship that's often flown in nullsec as well. Look at this chart. I'd say potentially, yep, a Macarial could be interesting, and I've actually never flown that ship myself, so I might actually just grab one. Yeah, the Macarial, 1-year low point. Interesting, we've not seen that in quite a bit, I think. The Nestor, also 1-year low point, breaking through the 380 million mark. 374 for the sellers, 345 for the buyers, who grabbing Nestors for less than 350. This does, in my opinion, also show that Tech 1 just isn't in the meta. Even the pirate faction battleships at the moment are going down. And I think this is grindable in nullsec, so maybe it also shows more stability in nullsec. The Nightmare is still above average though, selling at the moment for almost 600 million ISK. That's not bad. That is something that can get you quite a bit of ISK, especially if you've managed to buy one at like 400 million about a year ago. The Balgorn is also above average at the moment, 305 million for the first seller. Then the Rattlesnake is actually heading for a 1-year low point as well. Look at that. 433 for the sellers, 412 million for the buyers. If we try to hunt for 410 on the charts. That's around here on the charts. That is way below everything. That's also slight buy opportunity. Honestly, Macarial, Rattlesnake are also really good battleships for PvE for yourself. So let's say that you buy one, you're not sure if you use it, park it in Jita, and then if at some point there is a big Nausicaa war, and you might sell those for a nice profit. That's great. If not, and you find a use for them, that's great as well. That's how I would approach these 1 year low points in these pirate faction battleships. And finally, we've got the Vindicator that's actually back on the average. So we've got the Nightmare in a sell opportunity, and then we actually have Macarial, Nestor, and Rattlesnake at 1 year low points. Nice buy opportunities. Now for the more predictable trades that we're looking for, the Navy faction ships. Let's see if we can find those trends here as well. Apocalypse Navy issue, after reaching a 1 year high point of 500 million, is slowly moving on its way down. So that should mean that Amar loyalty points are very expensive, which should mean that they are losing out, which should mean that the Minmatar ships ought to be at low points at the moment. But sell opportunity is still at almost 478 million ISK for the Apocalypse Navy issue. It's still well above average. Armageddon Navy issue is also Amar related. Too bad that this data point here is completely screwing us over with the 2 billion mark. We've got to try and get that chart to show some actual volatility. Not that great, seemingly much less popular. You can see that from the volumes, and the price is actually not as nice as the Apocalypse Navy issue. Next up, we've got the Dominic's Navy issue, which actually reached a 1 year low point of around 400 million ISK and is moving its way back up a little bit here. 481 for the sellers, 421 for the buyers. So that should mean that Galente is doing okay at the moment, especially now that we see the Megatron Navy issue at a 1 year low point. 413 for the sellers, but 360 for the buyers. So 360, let's see if we can get that to show up. Yep, that's around here on the chart. I think that's another opportunity. Megatron Navy issue, and then wait for Galente Faction Warfare to lose out. And then we get the other end of the spectrum, Raven Navy issue, not a 1 year high point, but selling for a bit less than 500 million ISK is not bad. Great time to sell that. Scorpion Navy issue, not as popular, and actually holding just shy of 500 million ISK as well. But the low points of this one are never as clear. And then we've got the Tempest Fleet issue. Nope, not as pronounced. Is it then the Typhoon Fleet issue? That is a bit more pronounced towards the 1 year low point, but also actually just recovering from that. 350 would have been a nice buy opportunity. Yeah, we're still at 356 for the buyers. So yeah, at the moment, if you're looking to grab a couple, I'd say Typhoon Fleet issue makes a lot of sense. And Megatron Navy issue at 360 makes some sense as well. And if you're looking to sell, of course, it's Apocalypse Navy issue if you happen to have that. And potentially Raven Navy issue as well, right there. So that's the faction warfare related Navy items. In the battleships, it's a bit more tricky, of course. Keep that in mind. You've got those very low volumes from time to time, and then you've got the big spikes here and there as well. But it's a lot trickier to trade in the faction battleships than I would say in the faction cruisers or the faction frigates. Still, it shows the trend at the moment. And Galente coming from that low point, so apparently losing a little bit of ground there. And Amar is actually losing out, but maybe at the cusp of a bit of a rebound here, as we can see that in the last let's say since the start of September, we have gone back down a bit in a price there. That makes for a very interesting situation, I think, with lots of potential in the upcoming months. But you need to risk the buys now, let's say in a Typhoon Fleet issue, and then hope for a sale at above 500 million ISK. That's not bad, right? 350 buy, sell above 500 million ISK. That's quite a nice profit. But let's say don't buy 10 Typhoon Fleet issues. This is definitely one where you don't want to overdo it in the volumes. And that's going to be it for this week. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. And I'll see you all next time.